Welcome back to Bleav in Softball. I'm your host, Jenna, and I just want to say happy Women's History Month because it is always a great time to cover women's sports, but I like when there's a little extra something special like there is this time of year. And we are actually recording this week's episode on International Women's Day as well. So it's coming out Thursday, March 9th, but actually got to make this episode on this day, which is super special. So however you got here today, whether on an audio podcast platform like Apple, Spotify, etc., or you're watching on YouTube, thank you, and go ahead and subscribe if you haven't yet. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bleav in Softball. Again, that's BLEAV. And also click the link in our bio on both, and you can purchase the merch, or you can go to shop.bleav.com. By the way, I know I showed last week the black Safer Out version. There's 3 different ones available. I'll give you a sneak peek this week on the purple. You have to go to shop.bleav.com to find out, or click that link in our bio. All right, let's go through today's batting order. First, we'll cover our bases, give you some news and callouts from around the softball world. Then we'll head into today's interview with Nicole Mendes. Now, she has played the game at every level. She's got that OU DNA, so it should be pretty fun. Then we'll end things with the foul tip of the week, where we share tips to help us get better. All right, let's get started. Covering our bases. BetOnline remains your number one source for all your sports betting this season. Everything from pro and college basketball to UFC, MMA, and more. You'll always find the latest odds, team matchup info, player news, and game trends at BetOnline. With live betting options, free contests, and live scores for almost any sport or game imaginable. BetOnline is truly the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite leagues and events. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use promo code Bleav, again, BLEAV, to receive your rewards. BetOnline.ag, where the game starts. And where I'm starting from today, by the way, again, International Women's Day, I'm actually recording in one of my best friend's family's house. And it's really exciting because I'm actually in Las Vegas for 24 hours to attend the Mountain West Women's Basketball Conference Tournament Championship game. And it's because she actually went to Stanford with me. Her name's Lindy LaRock. She played on the Stanford women's basketball team. She was an assistant coach there, and now she's the head coach and became one of the youngest head coaches, by the way, in Division I women's basketball recently. And she is going for it with her team. So just felt like very appropriate way to celebrate International Women's Day and this month that we're in right now. And from the softball side, I just want to say thank you to Softball America for giving me an opportunity this season. I'm a contributing writer this year, and I'm pretty proud of my first piece that was recently published because it's really important, I think, the story that's being told. So it's called How Pac-12 Softball is Built on Women Leaders. And it's really essentially highlighting how the Pac-12 has all female head coaches for softball. And it's the only conference in the Power 5 that can say that. And it's only one of 2 leagues in the entire nation, the other one being the Ivy League. So it's just something that's really cool. And they're very supportive of each other when they're not competing against each other as well. The cool part to add into that mix is also that 6 out of 9 of those head coaches are actually leading their alma maters, which is pretty awesome. So I just highly recommend reading it and learning more about how the Conference of Champions also champions women. And it did so in another way too. They just inducted the first all-female class into the Pac-12 Hall of Honor. But for us as softball fans, like, this was awesome because there were 12 women, love that, but 4 of them were softball players. Incredible. Jessica Mendoza, Danielle Laurie, Susie Parra, and Janie Takeda Reed. So if you don't know, that's Stanford, Washington, Arizona, and Oregon, respectively. But for us too here at Bleav in Softball, 2 past guests with Mendoza and Danielle Laurie. So it was really exciting to just see them honored in that way. And we had 2 other past guests who actually were in the West Coast Conference Hall of Honor induction recently. And that was last week's guest, Cindy Ball Malone, and then our season 2 guest, Sam Fisher, who's actually, both of them are from, by the way, the 805 near where I am. And then there's just cool things like, what our former past guest, Tori Tyson, has been doing recently. Her leadership of the Howard program. They just played UCLA at UCLA, and it's the first time that the Bruins have ever played against an HBCU, and they hosted it. They made it a celebration, and it was just really empowering to see those 2 communities and everyone that supported them come together. So it's just, women making history during Women's History Month. Gotta love it. And Bleavers doing big things. So that was just an awesome way, for me at least, to start off this International Women's Day. Second, I want to give a shout out to the breakouts. And what I mean by that is, I have a special place in my heart for players who stick with it throughout their career and then have it finally pay off. And I might be a little bit biased because my senior year is when I finally felt like myself and also happened to play my best too. And I think it's a little more rare maybe now too with the transfer portal because people are able to make more moves, but we're seeing some early breakouts this season and I love it. And one example is Jordan Van Hook out of ASU. She entered her senior season this year. She had 15 career hits. After the first few weeks, she actually leads the nation with 13 home runs heading into Pac-12 play. So she has almost as many home runs just this season as she did in her entire career for hits. That's incredible. And this is a very offensive program, especially in the last few years. And she's outpacing some of the past leaders. This time last year, Sid Sanders, before she has now transferred over to Oklahoma, she only had 7 home runs. And then she ultimately finished with 21 at the end of the season. Back in 2021, Maddie Hackbarth had 12 when she tied the program record eventually at 20 at that point. So, something like that's gonna earn you a Pac-12 Week 2 Player of the Week, which she did. And this is all during a coaching change also, which is just not an easy thing to do. So very impressed. Third is something else that's not too easy, which is dealing with depth. Some teams have so many good players on the roster that it's hard to narrow it down to a starting lineup. But, that's a good problem to have, right? But it's also not easy to manage because as a coach, you have to balance keeping morale up on the team, people's confidence, getting more people some game reps, especially if there's an injury or something that just was unforeseen, and helping everyone stay ready at all times because you just never know what's going to happen, especially in sports. And I'll give you an example of this. OU's Grace Lyons didn't play on Saturday this past weekend. That sounds a little weird, doesn't it? So Tiari Jennings actually moved from second to shortstop against Kentucky, and then a redshirt freshman, Kinsey Lilio, played second, and then Jennings moved back to second against Illinois Chicago, and a freshman, Avery Hodge, played shortstop, and these youngsters got to get some reps. And Patty Gasso told reporters how important it is to get the players in-game experience at different spots because there are some people that she might want to work into the lineup if they're a great matchup for a pitcher that they're going to face or any sort of situation where they're just going to be called upon and they're going to have to play the position well when they're called upon it. And if they all play the same position, then that's kind of problematic. So they've been trying to do a good job of getting them reps in a lot of different places, and she feels like it is paying off. So I'm looking forward to Florida State, by the way, going to Norman on March 14th. Keep an eye on that and circle that on your calendar. And then to bring it home, some teams are finishing up preseason right now. Some are starting conference play. This is really the point of the season where open spots are starting to be earned, but you still got to be on your toes. It's an interesting point in the season to be working at. And I would say it's an exciting preseason, but there's still so much good softball to come. And someone who knows what it's all about is today's guest. So let's head into the interview. She's an Oklahoma alum, 2-time national champion, 4-time Big 12 champion, Tokyo Olympian with Team Mexico, and Athletes Unlimited Pro, Nicole Mendes. We did it. We're here. We're ready to chat.
We did it. We did it. We tried, and we finally prevailed. And here we are, finally talking.
I know. We were just both talking about how busy we are right now, but it's the best time of year, right? Like you've been busy covering preseason games with Flow softball and all that good stuff, which is awesome. And let me start with a hard-hitting question first. Has your dog been missing you while you've been doing all this?
No, she's been fine. I've been missing her. I'll like try to cuddle with her at the end of the day, and she's like, "Leave me alone." I'm like, "Just love me, just love me." But no, she's perfectly fine. Dolly girl, she's an independent woman. So yeah,
I love it. Did you name her after Dolly Parton?
I did. My senior year of college, well, first senior year before COVID. I tore my ACL and I was rehabbing, and I would have to get up earlier than workouts. So I would rehab an hour before workouts, and an hour of workouts, I would do a workout rehab. Um, and those were some tough mornings. And so 9 to 5 was kind of my little anthem. I was like, it's rehabbing 9 to 5, it feels like. And I was obsessed with the song. And a couple weeks after I started rehab, my mom came in. She's like, "Do you want a dog?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I mean, sure, I'm high on pain meds and I can't walk, but yeah, I've been wanting one." She goes, "I found one." Takes me to the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. Me and Giselle Juarez. Giselle drove us. She found the dog on Craigslist. This guy pulls up. It's like one of those towns where it's a gas station and then nothing else. And this guy in a white van pulls up, and I was like, "You have the dog?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's in the van. Come look." And it just, I was like drugged up, laying in the back seat. I'm like, "What's going on?" And Giselle's freaking out. And my mom goes, and she's over there for a long time. I'm like, "What's going on?" And she comes back and she has my puppy, and I end up naming her Dolly after the song. But yeah, it was quite an adventure. Glad it turned out great. So yeah.
Yeah, worth it in the end, it sounds like, but that is
Very.
crazy. And then, national championship not long after that. So hey,
Yeah.
it works out.
So 10 out of 10, recommend you getting a dog on Craigslist.
Perfect. That is quite the endorsement.
Ringing. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad she hasn't missed you too much, because you've been doing cool things. Like you made history and you called the first college softball game that ended up re-airing later on MLB Network. And you've had such a cool perspective on just what's the landscape this year. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about 2023 softball so far.
Oh, so many thoughts, so many upsets, and I'm loving it. I love whenever college softball causes chaos. It's so fun to just sit back, especially whenever you're not in the middle of playing in it. It's a lot more fun to sit back and watch it all unfold in front of you. And this season, I thought last season there was a lot of upsets. We saw it a lot in postseason, but this season already early on, I think one team that I am definitely gonna root for this season and watch is Fullerton. They have been doing some big things. They've had really competitive games, and I may have rooted for them a time or two whenever I wasn't calling games, but it was just really fun to watch them in preseason tournaments and just get to know them as a team, get to know them through the eyes of a fan. I like their pitching style, but I think it's because I played with Thule. She was one of the pitchers for the Mexican national team. I faced her in AU this past summer. So I know her well, and I know how her mind works. And it is just, she's really elevated their pitchers a lot. So they have been really, really fun to watch. I think if I had to pick one, that would be the team that I like the most.
I agree. And you know what? Thule's been on the show a couple times.
Yeah.
And I know a sense of what you're talking about, which you know way better, given the fact that you've been teammates for so long and all of that stuff. But that little bit of fire that's in her, I've seen some of her tweets too about them not being ranked and, stuff like that. And I'm like, I love it. I love it.
I do too. They totally should be ranked though. I mean, they beat Tennessee, who's now in the top 10. They beat Ole Miss. They've had really competitive games against several top 5 teams. So I think they should be ranked. If Baylor can be ranked because they beat Oklahoma, I think Fullerton can be ranked because they've had some big time wins.
Yeah, I think it's only a matter of time. I also am rooting for them on a personal level because there is a player on that team, if maybe you know from having called some games, but Hannah Becerra. There's no relation, but not a common last name. So I'm always like pro Hannah. So that's another thing to add to the list.
She's fun. She's fun to watch. And in the box, I'm like, ooh, good eye. Oh, that's a good swing. Like I'm getting into it. She's fun to watch. I like her style. Definitely stood out from the first tournament that I called with them all the way through. So it must be a last name thing. I don't know, but it's just a cool style. It's a cool style.
Yeah, we'll go with that. It's definitely that. Well, and you mentioned it too, Oklahoma, obviously, as there should be, there's been a lot of talk about them this season. But there's also been some comparisons to just the OU teams of the past, which obviously you were a part of and know so well. How would you compare this year's team to just past OU teams?
Yeah, it's such a hard question to answer, and I think sometimes it's a little silly because we like to go on history, right? We like to, well, this is the standard. How do they compare up to that? But I have personally, I can't speak for other programs, but I have never been a part of a team at Oklahoma that was the same from one year to the next, even if we only gained one person or three people. The lineup stayed the same. It didn't really matter. The whole team, the whole vibe was just different because it's a new year. People are high at different times and people are low at different times, and personal things that are going on in their lives. I think it really changes the team dynamic. And I think this OU team started off slow. They did. They started off slow. They were shaky the first 2 weeks, not just with stringing hits together. I mean, they have power. That's obvious, but just getting used to a new lineup. And then the pitchers just struggling with walks. And then the thing that I think is cool about this year's team that's unique is there hasn't been this many new players in a long time. So I think back to the 2020 team, that's the most similar time that I can think of when there was that many newcomers. I think there was 9 newcomers to the Oklahoma team, but that was also during COVID. So even though OU didn't get to finish and play out that year, they still had a whole year and a half to get to know each other before they really played their first real season. And so I think that counts for a lot of different things, a lot of bonding, a lot of learning each other, because that's a huge part with a new team with a lot of incomers is you got to learn their style. You got to learn how to talk to them, not just on the field, but off. And I think that's what this team has been. I've been kind of eyeballing is at first, okay, their lineup totally new. You have Haley Lee, you have Sid Sanders, you have Jocelyn Erickson, who is just crushing the ball. Again, something about similar names, I don't know, but to me, she's totally unique in her own way, which has been fun to see her just kind of play free. And what they've done really well is kind of embrace, okay, this is new, this is different. What does my role look like this year? Because I don't think a lot of those girls on the teams before that are still currently on the team have had to deal with that. And I think of players like T.R. Jennings and Jada Coleman, and this is just like crazy, but they've never known what it's like to lose your last game of the season. Like I have been fortunate enough to know that twice, but that was at the beginning of my career and then at the very end. Their whole entire collegiate career, they've always won their last game. And how cool is that, right? And so I think that also changes your perspective a little bit. And that's a challenge to stay hungry. So that's what I've seen from them is they're adjusting to this new role. They're adjusting to all the new players. And then they're just feeding these new players, okay, this is what it feels like. This is what it's like to live up here, not just the transfers, but the freshmen as well. I think there's a lot of talent, but learning how to not try to do too much and just play yourself. That's when you see the players come out and shine like Jada Coleman did last weekend, where she had a couple of home runs. And one of them, I saw this swing and I was like, you're ridiculous. It was out in front. I think it was like one-handed. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Hit a ball over the batter's eye in center field with a one-armed swing. Like, what are you doing? It's like, oh my gosh. But yeah, I just think they've finally started to settle in and find their groove.
I love the fact that you brought up essentially the concept that no two teams are the same, because I totally subscribe to that. I think to your point, it's like there is a standard, right? There's definitely a standard that OU has and that every program tries to have, but it doesn't mean that like it's cookie cutter every single season. So I love that you called that out because it's so easy to compare. But what do they say? Comparison is the thief of joy. You know, it's like I don't know how productive it always is. So I love that you were able to kind of differentiate between that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think, like you said, like it's a thief of joy. It just takes away from you being in the moment. And that was something that Coach Gasso talked about a lot in 2019 about her as a coach, her as a person, that she learned how to really enjoy that moment. That was Cindy Romero's senior year, Shay Knighten's, Kaylee Clifton, and she just really learned how to be in the moment and enjoy her time with them. And she talked about that a lot, not just in that year, but years after while I was still playing. And I'm sure it still resonates true with her. And that's one thing that I noticed from that year on, she talked about a lot more, is being present, being where your feet are, don't looking ahead. It just makes such a difference. It does. It really does. Because you're not stressed about winning games, losing games. Like, yeah, you're competitive, but you're just enjoying the challenge of coming up to the plate and facing a really good hitter, or being on the field and making a great play, or as a pitcher, stepping on the mound and saying, all right, I'm going to wheel and deal this inning. Like, let's get this pitch right where it's going to miss over the barrel or something like that. It frees you up in a way that without it, it's just, you play a little bit tighter. You don't enjoy it as much.
Really good point. Do you think that is the core of the championship mindset that you all talk about with Natty Patty? I'm keyed in on the Natty Patty nickname from Kaylani Ricketts, so I love it.
Yeah, Natty Patty. I got an alumni shirt that has that inscripted across the front. I'm officially a part of the alumni group. I felt very in at the World Series last year, front row with the Natty Patty. I was like, I'm one of them now. I think it just like, if you're going the recipe for success pathway, just like any recipe, there's no one ingredient that makes or breaks it. You have to have several different ingredients. I think that is definitely a key ingredient. I talked about getting to know your teammates and getting to know them on and off the field. I think a lot of times whenever you talk about bringing together a big group of girls who are in a very defining time in their lives where they're kind of figuring themselves out, they're figuring out what they want to do for the future, they're figuring out how cool it can be to perform at this level, they're getting stronger, they're getting smarter. It can be a little confusing, it can be a little chaotic, and if left unchecked, it can get a little crazy. And I think with Oklahoma, another ingredient to that success is getting to know people for who they are, not just what they bring to the field as an athlete. And that goes for the coaches, that goes for the players. And it's hard explaining this to somebody where I say we genuinely do care for one another. I am currently training with Jocelyn in Frisco, and we saw each other. We were chatting today, and our trainer was like, how long have you guys known each other? And I was like, we played in college together, and we're that tight because it was a real life sisterhood, and we really do love one another. We've had our ups, we've had our downs, but we're still really, really close friends. And I think that's the same thing to be said for anybody who's gone through that program, is you make friends for life. And even if you do go on and you transfer, a lot of times you'll have that connection with those players, because it wasn't just, oh, you're my teammate, so hi. It was, oh, you're this person, I really like you for XYZ. Oh yeah, and we get to play softball together. So I think that's another key component to their recipe.
That makes a lot of sense. And you are someone who had such an interesting time frame being a part of Sooner Nation, like actually on the field. Like, you played with, the Shay Knightens at the beginning of your career, and like you said, the Jocelyn Aloes, like towards the end as well. And I would imagine it's both inspiring and humbling a little bit. Is that fair to say?
It's humbling. It is so humbling. I'm a sophomore. I had a great freshman year. I'm like going out and hitting. I'm like, wow, I feel so powerful. And this freshman, Jocelyn, comes in and she's not even using her legs. It's all arms, and she's hitting it like 400 feet. I'm like, that's humbling. That's humbling. And then she goes on to be one of the best hitters, not just home run hitters, but best hitters of all time. And I'm like, man, like how humbling that I get to have that time with her, and how I get to know her as a person aside from softball, and how I get to learn from her mental game and how she studies, and getting to know Shay Knighten. I got to see her and her team play, and just talking to her about what her life looks like now and how she's pouring into others, and think about a lot of my teammates that came and went, just so much wisdom that I've learned definitely humbles me. I know that I don't know everything, but it's so cool that I have such a wealth of resources that I can tap into former teammates and say, hey, what do you think of this? Or man, I am struggling big time. What do you do to get out of this? And they always come through. So I think that's definitely been humbling, but man, it's been a fun ride to see what athletes look like whenever they compete at the highest level. And I was fortunate enough to get to do that every single year. And every single year of my, pretty much from my college career on, I was in the World Series all years. And then I got to go to the Olympics. I mean, that's the highest level. And then I got to play at AU, which I think has arguably some of the most talented players in the United States. And every year I've seen what that looks like. And it's never, like you said, cookie cutter. There's different ways to look at it. And I've taken things here and there. It's just been fun to sit back and watch that and apply it to my own game.
It does seem like a theme just in your career in a general sense, just meaning that you're close, like those personal relationships that you develop off the field, but it seems to translate really well on the field. So it's like it's good for the soul, and that's probably number one. But like, hey, actually this helps us be better, like realistically at the end of the day too.
Totally. I mean, if I have somebody who's up there pitching and they're going for it, I'm like, yeah, like I want to go all out for them. Like, of course, because I want to win. But if I have a really good friend who's up there and battling and throwing those pitches out there defensively, I'm like, I want her to look really good. I want my friend to look really good. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure my friend looks really good. I'm going to go that extra mile. Same thing if you have a lineup and you're talking with the hitter before you, like the conversations are going to be different. You can be more honest with them. You can say, hey, I'm noticing that to righties, the last 4 or 5 that I've talked to, she keeps throwing changeups outside. I know you struggle with that, but you should sit it because I keep hearing that. And I might not be able to talk like that to somebody that I don't know very well, or somebody that feels like I have their best interest at heart. So whenever those comments come, it's received better. And whenever those comments are directed towards me, I receive them better as well. It's not a one-way street. And I think that's why the relationships are so important outside, because you can be frank and you can talk about things and it's received in the best way possible. And it's an open line of communication.
Do you think that that also helps, especially in like the high pressure situations? Because the part that I didn't include in your intro in the beginning is that you were 3-time Women's College World Series all tournament. Also, you played, I think, a record at the time you graduated, 23 World Series games. You had a single game program record in postseason with 7 RBIs, like in 2021. Like, you seem to really know how to turn it up when it matters the most. And this seems like that plays into that as well.
Yeah, I love practices, because in those moments you can kind of test and see, okay, where's my limit? How far can I go? And whenever you're practicing with your teammates, you test the boundaries, and they're right there hyping you up whenever you make those plays. It's not just in a game, right? So you make a diving catch, or you're scrimmaging against your own teammates and you hit a ball off the wall and your scrimmage team wins. Like, they're hyping you up. It's crazy. It's fun. And everybody's celebrating. Like, that's such a fun moment, but it gives you that confidence, and it gives them that confidence that in the future, yeah, you can do it. Like, I see you do it in practice multiple times. It feels not routine, but it feels like you've been waiting for it. Oh, this is what I've been waiting for. This is my shot to show it, that kind of stuff. But I think my favorite part about getting big in big moments with the people that you love around you is whenever you create that culture of, okay, like, we're going to have that open line of communication, it allows you to say, how can I get better? Can you help me get better? More often than not, they say, how can I get better? And it's, how can we get better? How can iron sharpen iron? And then it continues to build. And then all of a sudden you're in a championship game and you're ready to go out and you're ready to have that opportunity again. And you look to your left and you see that teammate who you've been training with all year long saying, how can I get better? And you're telling her the same thing. And that moment comes and you're like, this is it. This is it. Like, we've talked about this. We've dreamed about this. Here it is laid out at my feet. I mean, I'd be silly to not take it. I'd be silly to shrink up and let that get to me this moment, because this is something that we've talked about all year long. So I think just talking about it, dreaming about it, pushing each other to get to that moment also really helps whenever you're actually in it, because you have somebody to share those thoughts and those comments with. You don't have to keep that inner dialogue to yourself.
Yeah, this reminds me of what you've brought up on some of the broadcasts that I've watched that you've been calling, where you talk about how the 6th and 7th innings are championship innings, because they are sort of often have these moments that you're talking about. And I just think that's a really cool connection that you've brought from your experience to the games that you call.
Yeah, championship innings they're just so fun, because it's like the walk-offs, the diving play, like that's where everybody says, all right, well, I have nothing to lose, so I'm just gonna go for it. And then they do. And a lot of times what happens is whenever you go for it, you often make those plays that maybe if you're in the 3rd, 4th inning, you're like, I could go for it, but it's early, like I don't want to risk it. 6th and 7th, you got nothing to lose. You got to go for it. And that's why I think you see so many things like that happening. Same thing at the World Series. It's the 6th and 7th inning of your season. So, I mean, you got nothing to lose. Just go for it.
That's a really good way to think of it. The 6th and 7th inning of your season. I like that a lot. And well, by the way, speaking of championships, I do have a question. I mentioned all the championships that you had just in college. Do you, when you order the rings, do you get all the same size? Do you get them different sizes so you can wear them on different fingers? Like, what are the logistics here?
I was horrible at this. I do know I did get one pinky ring for a Big 12 because I wanted to have my Italian mafia moment. I don't know. I wanted it. I wanted it so bad. And it's a beauty. It just like hunkers in right there. But all the other rings, I've panicked, and I only know my ring size for my like wedding band finger. And so I would panic and I would just say that same size. And I think one year it was like loose. And so I'm able to fit it on my index finger, or maybe I got somebody else's, I don't know. But most of them, my middle finger, my ring finger are the same size. So that kind of works out too. But I ordered them all for the ring size finger. Would not recommend. I recommend knowing all your ring sizes for all your fingers. But they just kind of come to you and they're like, hey, we need your ring size. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I just kind of want to spit out a random number. But then I'm like, what if it doesn't fit? So I just go with my go-to. So I have a lot of ring size fingers, or finger, I don't know, right here. A lot of them like right here.
Yeah, that's really funny. I mean, this is a champion problem, right? Like a champion problem.
It is a problem. I never thought I would, and I did it every year. I was there for 5 years. You would have think that I would have learned. Like the pinky ring, one year we talked about it the year before, and we're like, wouldn't it be cool if we got pinky rings? So I had like a little bit of a year's wait to really, oh yeah, and we like measured it. And that day everybody's like, yeah, we're gonna get pinky rings. So I was like, oh yeah, like I remember that ring size. Like I want a pinky ring. But every year you'd think I would have gotten better and been more prepared. This one, yeah. Same size as last year. That was my answer a lot of times. Same size as last year. Yeah.
Well, how often do you wear them now, realistically?
Oh, I never wear them. I think the only times that I've ever worn them is whenever I get them. I'll like bring them. Like whenever I do autograph signings, I'll bring them and I'll just place them there. I don't really wear them. They're big and they're clunky. I have one Big 12 ring that is really pretty. It just has like a red gem with a little OU with diamonds in the middle. And it's cute, it's dainty, it's small. And I've worn that one probably 2 or 3 times just outside, just for fun. And I've really enjoyed that one. But the rest of them, I'm like, they're so big. Like my fingers hurt. Like, what if they fall off? I'm like, I don't like wearing them. Yeah.
I mean, again, I call these types of things usually champagne problems, but this really is like a champion problem. So champ problems, we'll say champ problems.
Champ problems, yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, that's so funny. Well, I would say too, I remember seeing like not just the championships, but at the end of your college career, I think you talked about being strong and courageous. Like that's what you really learned the most. And you said you had no regrets. And I just wanted to talk to you about that because that's a really big deal. Like to not have regrets after like such a pivotal point in your life. That's kind of the goal, you know?
Yeah. I think back to 2019 and what I learned that year about going all out and kind of how we talked about kind of seems to be a theme that we've been talking about leading up to this point so far of championship innings and going all out. Why not? You have nothing to lose. And I feel like in my college career, sophomore year was tough. Like I felt myself playing really tentatively because I had a great freshman year. And then I have coach saying like, yeah, you're going to be a big part of this program. I have my mom saying like, oh my gosh, they wrote all these articles about you. I have myself saying, okay, this is where you are. We can be better. And I'm thinking about things from all different sides. And all of a sudden I'm just frozen by the what ifs and okay, I have to be and things like that instead of really enjoying the moment. So that's why 19 for me was such a fun year to play for. Wasn't my best year, but it was one of the most carefree that I felt. And then just continuing on with my career, it's just knowing like I gotta play my best. And then if that's good enough, then I get to start. And if not, so be it. And I think that was just really freeing my senior year, knowing, right, like I can go out and I can play the way I want to play because I mean I've won a championship. I've been to the World Series every single year, and heading into my senior year, I'm like, most girls can, not a lot of them get to say one of those things, much less both of those things. And you love this game and you don't know where it's headed and you don't know what your future in it looks like. So you might as well just enjoy it. And I think it was just the building and building and building of the past few years. And I mean, it's a work in progress. Like I graduated and it just felt really, it was just the timing was great. I had Shannon and Giselle come transfer in and be a part of that class because I was the only one left. So then I got 2 more buddies to be in my class and we all graduated, all 3 of us together. It felt right to just be able to end it and say, okay, you know what? Like that was an amazing experience. Like this is something that I love and I treasure and would I go back? Totally. But I'm content with closing that door. And that to me was probably like the most peaceful senior year that I've ever had. I felt really relaxed, really driven, but really relaxed in who I was in my style of play. But then, I mean, life goes on and you change and you evolve. And I would say like my rookie year at AU, I got crazy stressed and I've done all these amazing things, but I kind of forgot about that. And I felt like I had to prove myself and I kind of got frozen up by fear a little bit. And then things happened and I didn't play as much as I wanted to, but that doesn't define how good I am. And so a new year, new day, I'm training and I feel a lot more confident in myself again. I'm reviewing back to those years. So I just think it's like the ebb and flow of life. Like you just got to remind yourself of those experiences because sometimes in the middle, whenever it happens, you're like, I'm never going to forget this moment. Like it's going to last a lifetime. And then 2 years later, you catch yourself and you're like, whoa, I totally took that thing for granted that I told myself 2 years ago I never would. The similarity that I always make is after I tore my ACL, I couldn't walk. After surgery, it was hard taking a shower. It was hard going to the restroom. It was hard getting dressed. It was hard going and getting to class, like everything about it was hard. And I remember taking my first steps and I was so excited. I was like, man, like I'm walking, like I'm never going to take walking for granted. And this morning, woke up, walked out of bed, brushed my teeth, went to the restroom, took a shower, did everything. And I didn't think twice about it. And I just think that's the way life goes. So you have to constantly just revert back to what it is that I'm wanting to accomplish. What are my goals? What is my purpose? What are my values? What helps me get there? And then having that constantly in your mind and reviewing it, it just helps you a little bit more. I mean, I'm as guilty as it's the next person of falling into the trap of I don't have time to think about that or not consciously taking that time. But whenever I do, I'm like, wow, why don't I do this every day? This is so great. So it's just a life thing.
Well, that's a lot of self-awareness too that you're talking about, which seems like it's maybe part of that recipe as well, where you have to understand like where am I really at, and like what, to your point, is happening right now in the present, and understanding that about yourself, which is easier said than done.
Yeah.
Um, well, and you mentioned Athletes Unlimited too, and that's something I wanted to talk to you about as well, because you go from being at such a high, right, in your collegiate career, and it's an adjustment. Like this is a different environment. Luckily, you all seem really close, which to me is very impressive considering it's a much more individualized sort of fantasy version of softball. But how do you think that transition is going? And what are you hoping to do this year?
Morgan Stewart, she played at Washington and she's a great defensive coach, but more than I feel like she should be just life coach, should be her label. Um, I remember it was my junior year and she made this long post about like the transition out of college. Like everybody always talks about the senior year and the last first time, but I don't see a ton of posts about, okay, well, the last time happened, now what? And I think of her post and seeing that junior year and I read it and I was like, oh, yeah, that's great. And then I just kind of scrolled on. And then whenever I graduated, you're right. I had such a great core group of friends that I loved. I did life with them. I lived with them. I did Bible study with them. They were my church. They were my softball. Like they were everything. And all of a sudden, I don't have that anymore. So whenever I finished up my career, I still had 1 year of grad school left. So I was a GA at Oklahoma. And I wasn't a softball GA, but I worked with our athletic department. The position that I had, I couldn't be friends and I couldn't like hang out with my teammates because they weren't my teammates anymore. I was in a different role. And that was really hard because I see my friends and they're right there. And I'm like, hey, but I have to adhere to this new level and this difference. And that was really hard to be able to say, okay, well, now I just have to find a bunch of friends who are highly motivated, who love Jesus, who want to excel in whatever it is they do, whether it's softball, whether it's life, whether it's cooking. I don't really know, but just there's an area in their life that they want to just do it to their best of their ability and they're eager to learn. And I'm looking around, I'm like, man, this is hard to find. And I'm juggling my last year of grad school. I'm juggling my GA position. I am juggling lessons because all my GAs out there know you don't get paid jack squat and you're poor. So you want to have some more extra cash to spend. And then I'm also juggling physical training, working out, which is hard in itself whenever you go for a majority of your life saying, oh, here's my trainer, here's my sheet, let me just do my workout for the day, to actually having to plan it out. And okay, well, I have to get up in the morning because I want to do it, not because if I don't do it, there's no team that's relying on me, or there's no coach saying, all right, you have to stay 20 minutes after and do 10 minutes on the treadmill or whatever it is. And it was a lot of, it was just a lot. And then I got to squeeze in softball practice too. And so and by the way, you're doing this majority like on your own.
Yep.
And I was not prepared for that. I didn't feel the loss of identity. I feel like coach did a great job preparing us for that, not just in our senior year, but leading up. Is you're not a softball player, you're a person, and you get to play softball, but it's not your identity. It's not who you are. So I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, who am I? But I did feel like, oh my gosh, what do I do?
Yeah.
What do I do now? Cool, that's great, but what do I do? And it's been a bumpy road. I don't know. And I got to do this thing where I met a few people, and I met a guy at a radio station, and he brought me in for an interview, and he was like, by the way, that was a radio interview, but it was also an interview. Would you be interested in doing a radio show? I was like, I've never thought about radio. Sure. I did it. I absolutely loved it. Chris Plank said, hey, would you want to call some of the softball games on radio since you're doing radio now? Did it. Loved it. I got to do some broadcasting. I got to call a regional last year. My first ever game on TV was a regional. It was UCF. Like, what? Like, the opportunities that have been set up for me have been amazing. But I will say, I think even in the midst of me not knowing, the biggest thing that kind of helped me whenever those opportunities did stumble into my lap was I was constantly thinking, okay, well, I kind of like this. What can I do to get better in this area? Because if something does happen, I might feel really, really overwhelmed, but I will know, okay, this is 1, 2, 3, got to do those 3 things, and that'll help me. And I think that helped a lot with me getting settled in. And this year I've graduated finally. Woo! My mom actually asked, and she said, hey, would you want to go for your doctorate? And I was like, are you crazy? Are you crazy, lady? I should have known whenever she wanted to get the dog on Craigslist that she was crazy. But I was like, no, I don't want to get my doctorate. But I've graduated. I'm not a GA anymore. I have a lot more time on my hands. I feel a lot more settled, and I don't think I'm anywhere near as settled as I'm going to be in the next year or 2 years or 3 years. But I feel like that first year was a lot of me like stumbling around in the darkness in a house that I've never been in, and there's Legos everywhere. That's how it felt. And the off season, I was able to turn on the lights and say, okay, here's a couch, here's a desk, let's pick up the Legos. And I feel like I've missed a Lego piece or two, and I still stumble in the dark a little bit, but I just feel a little bit more settled. I feel a little bit more grounded. I know my surroundings a little bit better. And I think for this year, for 2023, it's helped me be a little bit more resolved in the path that I want to take, and have a little bit more clarity of this is a path that I do want to take.
Right. And I think I saw you posted something to the effect of, 2022 was a year of planting seeds, and 2023 is a year you're hoping that that's when things are really going to grow and flourish. But you're right. You had to yeah. we hope they grow, of course.
Yeah.
But like, you had to put in that thoughtfulness and that hard work to do that.
Yeah. The irony, I had no idea 2022 was going to be that hard, but in January 2022, I said, well, not even in January, that previous summer, I was just like, I felt the word like planting a seed. And it was from my pastor, and he was giving a sermon about how if you plant a seed and then you bury it, and then you come back next day and you dig it up and you're like, has it grown yet? And then you bury it again and you go back, and 2 days later, has it grown yet? It's not going to grow. You have to let it rest. You have to let it do its thing. And sometimes you can't ever see that the roots are coming out and it's starting to grow. And whenever it pokes through, that doesn't mean you dig it out and you're like, look, it's growing. You have to leave it in the soil, and you have to let it take deep roots, and it's fragile and it's delicate, and you have to give it time and give it space to get strong. And you can't over nurture it, and you can't over care for it, just like if not caring for it at all. will do anything good. And so for me, my word for 2022 was just plant the seed, but then also with like a little asterisk and let it grow. Don't dig it up, you know? And I just feel like that was me stumbling around the dark. I'm like, I'm just a seed trying to poke out of the ground. I'm like, where am I? You know, where's the sun? I want to be out there. But it was a lot of growing, and I needed that to be able to be where I am today. And for 2023, I feel like I'm in that very delicate, I've sprouted, but my leaves are very small and I'm very delicate. One strong wind could blow me away, you know, but I'm trying to anchor my roots and grow them deeper and grow them stronger. I'm trying to get stronger as a whole. And hopefully in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I'll start to be a stronger plant. I'll be able to grow more. But I just feel like this year I've sprouted, and a lot of growing and a lot of attention that still needs to be paid. But I'm not the seed anymore. Like I let myself kind of wander through that, and I've been able to kind of figure out, yeah, this is the path. Yeah, I do want to do this. I do want to do that.
I love that analogy. I'm probably gonna like steal it for my own purposes now. Like,
Do it.
because yeah. So
I stole it from my pastor.
I was gonna say, tell your pastor, like, this is
Yeah.
great, because I love that. And I think that it's something that's so easy for us to forget. And I can tell you, I've probably multiple times in life been digging up that seed that I planted to see, hey, has this actually happened yet? You know, and so that I think is like super powerful. Just a great
Yeah.
way to look at it.
Well, thanks. I have to just make everything super visual for myself, because I sometimes if I say, hey, Nicole, you got to do this, I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't connect. And so I have to give myself a visual reason to do it. I have to give myself a visual, all right, this is what happens when you do this, and visually lay out my steps. And then I'm like, oh, that makes so much more sense. Like I said those words, I just had to change the direction behind them. But for me, whenever I make things visual, it just, I don't know, something about it just helps me a ton.
Well, I think as softball players and athletes, like, we're visual people, right? Like it makes
Yeah.
sense. It makes
Show me
total
the
sense.
drill.
Yeah, right? Like, keep your eye on the ball. Well, we're trying to keep our eye on life, right? So,
Yes,
no, absolutely.
absolutely.
How do you think this fits in with your Olympic experience? Because I'll tell you, I think I mentioned to you that I've had several of your Team Mexico teammates on, and I love all of them. Like, talking with all of them was amazing. The culture's amazing. I love that you're all witches, and that's sort of like your theme. And you know, it was like Tori Vidalis, Danielle O'Toole, Brittany Cervantes, like Sasha Palacios, like all of these amazing players. I was so pumped
Yeah.
to see you all in Tokyo. But you know, coming off that high, the way that you did with college and with your experience at Oklahoma, like, I've heard from a lot of folks that that's really difficult with the Olympics, but also there's a lot of planting seeds that went into that before you actually got to Tokyo. So it feels like that's really
Ah,
relevant.
so 2021 was amazing because all of these goals that I had for myself, 1 year goals, 3 year goals, 5, 10, even the Olympics was like an 18-year goal in the making. They all came true. They all happened. Like I achieved them all in 2021. That was amazing. And then I'm like, oh shoot, I I did all my goals. What do I do now? And that, I think that's why another reason 2022 was so hard. But also um, going off of 2021, just how great of a year it was. Because I don't want to glaze over that at all, because it was truly an amazing year for me ending my collegiate career. Not just winning that championship was just icing on the cake, but just having the chance to not just graduate, but graduate with Shani and with Giselle by my side, like that was amazing. And just having my teammates, Joss and I were super close that year as well. And just having everybody be really, really tight. I just love that. And then stepping into that, and I'll never forget my first weekend with Team Mexico and how we had like a 4 hour rain delay in Georgia in the middle of the summertime. You can imagine the humidity. I was like, I'm dying. But we were stuck in this tiny little room, all of us, for 4 hours, and we were playing contact. And you just have to guess what somebody's thinking about. That's literally what the game is. So I don't know anybody, and I'm playing this game where I'm having to guess what they're thinking. I'm like, I'm going to get to know you really quick. And I felt like I was welcomed in as one of them right away. And I was like, I, we weren't even supposed to make it to the Olympics. And I was just wanting to be on the team because I wanted to know about my mom's side, my mom's culture, my culture. And I wanted to be on the team because I loved them and I loved who they are. And they reminded me of my family. And they're all talking about stories of their family. And I can totally relate. I'm like, yeah, my parents did that too. And we're cracking up and we're having a good time. We're all loud, we're all funny, we're just shooting the breeze and playing softball. And it was just an amazing experience. And the Olympics was not easy. It was not easy for several different reasons. But the girls, through it all, the highs, the lows, through it all, they were just right there, and they were a rock, and they were a family. And it really was like the witches we were just tight. We were bundled up all together. And whenever you're having a bad day, good day, that's who you turn to, and that's who you had. And to have that, and just to like see what it was, because I was one of the youngest ones on that team, to see what it was to be a woman who is out of college and not necessarily has their life figured out, but they've had that experience and they've gone through things that I haven't even experienced yet. And just to see them and look up to them and get to talk to them was just, man, I have such a love for those girls. They're just amazing. It was a phenomenal year. Like I said, like it's so many goals that I got to accomplish.
Well, and again, the theme that seems to be consistent, this consistent thread throughout all the different parts of your career at all the levels, is that relationship piece. And you're talking about just like the amazing women that you have encountered and that you've been to them as well. And I would say to you, like, this week it's International Women's Day and it's Women's History Month. And for you, what does empowering women and women cheering on women mean to you?
For me, it is transparency. I think that is something that we as women don't always do. We as girls really find it hard to do. It's just hard being transparent with how you're feeling. It's hard being vulnerable. No one likes taking the first step. It's hard. But I've found more often than not, whenever I go to people and I make the first step, they're wanting to make the first step too. And more often than not, I'm not the only one alone in this. And I think there's so many things that I wish I had brought up sooner or asked somebody about, but I was nervous before or thinking I was the only one. And that kind of prevented me from talking about it or asking about it until way later than I could have learned about it or known about it or improved. And that goes for body image, that goes for mental health, that goes for softball. Like, how do you get better? And being vulnerable to ask a teammate, that goes for constructive feedback. Hey, coach, what is it that I can do? What is it that you see me have? Going up to another person and saying, wow, you're really successful. Why are you so successful? Do you mind if I ask? I mean, what are they going to be like? No, I totally mind. How dare you ask me? A lot of times we just make stuff up in our heads and we don't want to be transparent with other people because we're scared of how we might look or how we might feel, or if we might get like rejected or things like that. But a lot of the times it's just that it's made up in our heads. And so whenever you're transparent with yourself, you can be transparent with others. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of strong women, not just in my softball career that I've gotten to know, but just in my personal life and people that I've met along the way. And one theme that I really have seen all across the board is, while they all have different personalities, to and from outgoing, introverted, strong, more of servant minded, they're all very much okay with being themselves. And the ones that I see as the strongest, those are the ones who are the least afraid of looking vulnerable. They're okay with asking questions. They're okay with looking silly. They're okay with being vulnerable and being soft. And they're okay with saying, okay, I can be soft, but I can also be pretty badass. I can be pretty tough. And to me, whenever I see that trend or that strength in a woman, I say, okay, that's somebody that I want to know more. That's somebody I want to talk to and just get their insight, even if whatever it is they do doesn't apply to me at all. She could be in shoes and I'm like, hey, what is it about you? You know, because just there's a lot of times a story behind that they share that involves them feeling insignificant and not wanting to be vulnerable and transparent. And then they did, and they realized, what the heck am I doing? And they haven't looked back. So that is the message that I could give, is trying to be more intentionally transparent to yourself, to other people in your lives, to other women in your lives.
I love that answer. For me, I think of authenticity right away, right? But from what you just laid out, it's like, well, what is part of authenticity is transparency and vulnerability, right? Like you have to have those things really in order to be authentic. So I love that. And just like you, with all the amazing people you've played with, including yourself, I am both inspired and humbled right now by all these nuggets that you're giving out.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. I think the coolest thing is to be able to say something and somebody else go, wow, like I like that. I want to take it. Because I mean, I've learned all these things from other people. So it's not always my original thought, but I take it, I change it maybe a little bit to fit me, and then you take it and you change a little bit to fit you, and then the chain and the list goes on and on. So just to be able to help one person say, oh, I didn't think about it like that, and then the next person gets to say the same thing. I think that's the coolest thing about sharing knowledge and talking.
That's such a good point. That's when things clicked for me, even just as a softball player with softball specific things, is when I would take things I'd learned from other people and make it my own. And that's even more of a life lesson. So I completely agree.
Yeah.
And even though I don't want to wrap up, I will. And I play this game with everybody that comes on the show. It's called Safer Out. And basically, I'll just bring something up, a topic. It's usually related to softball. And if you like it or you agree with it, you call it safe. If you don't, then you just call it out. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the first one is wearing sunglasses and a visor. So like double sun protection in the field.
Safe. As an outfielder, saved my butt a couple times. So it's safe.
I had a feeling, because I feel like it's definitely more of an outfielder thing if you had to choose, like between outfield and infield. And
if you were to be like just sunglasses, no visor, I'd be like, that's out. Like you got to wear the visor.
I agree.
I know.
I agree with that.
You're like missing something, you know? It's like just yeah.
Yeah. Visor first, and then I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. That was the first one. Second one is true lefties. So like you, where it's like you throw left too, you don't just hit left. Playing positions other than, being a pitcher or an outfielder or a first baseman.
Safe. I think it's fun to see that. And I think a lot of times whenever you see somebody do that, you're like, oh, that's so weird. And then they're really good at it. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess they're good enough. And then the next lefty comes along and they're like, I can do that too. And then you start to see it more and more. I think of lefty catchers, starting to see a lot more of those, when everybody was saying, whenever I was growing up, I mean, I never wanted to be a catcher, but if I did, everybody would always say, oh, you can't because you're lefty. So I would say that's safe.
Well, I agree with you too, because I don't know if, you can't in general isn't a great thing to have in your vocabulary, but to say you can't because of this thing that you can't even control, that seems like not the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. First two down. Next one is NIL, safer out.
Could we have a video replay?
People have asked that. Yes.
I think it's good. I think it's good for athletes to grow and be able to learn important. I think it's so good to learn important things like taxes and how all that stuff works. But I will not name names, but I know several athletes who have gotten all these endorsement deals and it's been amazing. And then they just spend the money and they don't know, like, oh, you got to pay taxes on that. I'm like, yes, you do. Now, how do you pay taxes on that? I don't know. I just know you have to. But I think if you're going to enable that, you also have to allow that education to happen. And I understand NCAA is trying to just try and make it, because I mean, what you make as a softball player is going to be right now, as where we stand, far less than if you're a football player, right? Just off the bat. And hopefully one day that divide continues to shrink and shrink and shrink. But as it is right now, that's not the case. But if you're going to provide these athletes with these opportunities, you also have to allow rules that enable them to learn and be able to be supported. Because if you're the NCAA and you're saying, hey, no, like you can't do that, I'm like, well, you can't provide us with an opportunity to make a ton of money and then say, well, we also have to treat you as a regular student, so we're not going to give you anything. To me, a regular student on campus has the opportunity to go to a financial advisor for everyday things. They should, if you're an athlete, have the opportunity to go to a financial advisor for NIL deals and branding and things like that. I think it's a tricky landscape and there's just so much to come from it. So I think there needs to be a video replay on it and just maybe like a little revisit after that.
I agree with you that education is key, because even some NFL players that are making millions, because of a lack of this like financial literacy or that education, a very high percentage go bankrupt because they just don't know how to manage it all. So I completely agree with that.
Yeah. In all areas, just helps. It helps.
Yep, definitely. All right. Well, last one is bat flips, safe or out?
Oh, I have to say out, but it's not because I'm like, oh, you're a girl, so you can't bat flip. Like, I could care less about that. I don't like it whenever guys, I'm just like, the type of player that I am, I don't want to bat flip. If you want to bat flip, that's your business. Go on. But for me personally, I like to get it done. And then I just like to just go around and do my business and act like I do that all the time. Like, I think that's kind of fun, is to be up here and to hit a monster bomb and just be like, yeah, like whatever, like I hit that all the time, like to me, I love that. So that's kind of my subtle in your face kind of thing. Some girls love them, some girls hate them. I'm like, I'm gonna say out. Yeah.
Fair enough. I think the best part actually from like hitting a bomb, for example, is I don't know if there's anything better than when you come around third base and your team's like there to welcome you,
Fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if your team has like a cool thing that they do. I've seen some cool home run celebrations. Like those I'm like, ooh, like that was a good home run celebration. It's happened to me a couple times where I've been on defense and I watch them round third and meet their team. They do cool thing. I was like, whatever, because it's so cool. Yeah.
You guys had some cool ones in AU too.
Yeah, those are so fun. They are so creative. I felt they're like, okay, what's our theme? Like, what are we going? I'm like, think, be creative, get your mind out of the box. Like, I'm like, I don't know. But they do a great job coming up with themes every week. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hopefully see you maybe celebrating one of those in the not too distant future. And I really appreciate you taking the time to chat, especially for, International Women's Day. Like, we're actually recording on International Women's Day, which is really cool.
Yeah, it is. Well, Thank you for having me. Seriously, I've enjoyed this. I was thinking this has been so fun. I just loved it. So thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. I really enjoyed my conversation with Nicole, and I just love walking away from conversations where I feel like I learned something that resonates with me. And there were a few things that she mentioned in our conversation that I really do feel that way. And I hope that you feel that way too, from this conversation and just from the show. So with that, let's transition to the foul tip of the week. This week's foul tip is about owning our response. We often talk about how there's a lot that we can't control in this game. We can't control it, but that we can control our effort and our attitude. And it seems like every coach I talk to talks about how important it is not to go too high or too low, mentally and emotionally. Miami, Ohio head coach Kumar calls it neutral thinking. And this really comes to the surface when we are responding to something that happens. Just staying consistently neutral, whether it's good or bad, does help you perform more consistently as well. So when you do something great, like hit a home run, you don't all of a sudden think you can just show up to the next at bat and automatically hit another one and have success. It is a clean slate each time. And you have to tap into the focus that helped you in that home run at bat. And it obviously gets really challenging when something bad happens. It could be big or small. It's just how are you going to respond to it? A couple weeks ago, we talked about the Lisa Fernandez stat with the GOAT herself. And just as a pitcher, how after she gave up a hit, she would just compete with the next batter she faced. And she was great at getting the next one out. But I like how Kelly I has also gone further with this, saying, even if you give up a hit to the next hitter or something like that, they give you props anyway because you competed and you attacked the zone versus walking them or being timid or tentative or dramatic. You still went after it, and that deserves credit. I actually saw this a little bit this past weekend calling games at the DeMarini Invitational. Freshman Nyjah Kennedy, who once again is Pac-12 Pitcher of the Week, she threw a no-hitter versus Villanova on Friday with 18 strikeouts. One short of the program record, by the way. Incredible. But the next game she threw on Sunday against Miami, Ohio, she only gave up 2 hits, couple line drives, and it was a shutout. But both times she came back and struck out the next batter after giving up a hit. And there was also a little bit more velocity on the next pitch. I even heard a couple of grunts coming out of her in those moments, and I could tell that she wanted to respond. She wasn't pressing. It wasn't like this extra pressure that she's putting on her shoulders. It was just her dialing in even more. And the same thing goes the other way too. What do you do after you strike out at the plate or after you make an error on defense? Listen, we're gonna get beat sometimes. That's the thing about this game, the thing about life. It happens. But owning how we respond to it is what really defines us and inspires other people too. So that's it. Own your response. That's the foul tip of the week. You've been listening to Bleav in Softball, part of Bleav Network and presented by BetOnline. The show is available anywhere you get your podcasts, wherever you listen, including Bleav.com and on YouTube too. Subscribe to the show, rate it, and if you liked it, write a review for it. Again, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Bleav in Softball. That's BLEAV. And you can reach out to me personally on Twitter at Jenna Becerra01 and Instagram at Jenna Becerra as well. Thank you for tuning in, and catch you soon.